It's our purpose in this course to try to emphasize the importance of the individual, even the lowly individual as he might be considered by most of the people of the world, and the small things that, when they are put into the service of God, can be rather important. We get a lot of church bulletins and so forth at our house and enjoy reading them, and my wife came across one from the church in Greenville, Alabama. The preacher at Greenville, Alabama, is a man named Charles Box. I've known Charles, I guess, 45 years. We haven't been in contact with one another, but he has a reputation of being a good, sound, solid gospel preacher and has done a great work in his lifetime. I think I'm going to try to contact him. I bet that fellow's getting old by now. You reckon he might be? And so I'm going to try to contact him. But Brother Box has put in his bulletin an article written by a man named Jordan Alker. And it seems to fit in the general theme that we're trying to emphasize here. And so I just want to read to you this article and see if you don't think it might be a part of our study. Are salt and light important? I will tell you that both of these are so important that not a day goes by that we do not depend on them. It is impossible for life to be sustained without salt and light. The body needs salt in order to function, and then without light, the physical life would cease to exist. Have you ever thought what would happen to our planet if the sun were to quit burning? Our planet would literally become an ice cube. Whenever Jesus said that we as Christians are salt and light in Matthew 5:13, he was paying us a bigger compliment than most of us realize. He is letting us know that we hold value. Now that's the point we're trying to make in our study. But that value does not exist whenever we are not seeking him. Ye are the salt of the earth was not addressed to the Hall of Famers. It wasn't the most prestigious Pharisee in all the land. He wasn't even speaking to the philosophers. He was talking to the average, everyday listeners. Those people that were merchants and fishermen, the wives and children. Salt was something that was so valuable that it was often used to supplement wages. This is where the expression, he's worth his salt, comes from. What does this statement say about the earth? Well, simply put, it is of no real value. He then tells us what does hold real value. The salt is the Christian. This means that the only real value that the world has comes from Christians. Ye are the light of the world. This particular phrase enlightens us to the fact that we are to be active in the plans of God, but also that we share in some of the characteristics of God and Jesus. For God is light, 1 John 1:5. And Jesus said, I'm the light of the world, John 8:12. So what exactly is the purpose of light? It is to dispel darkness. This tells us that the world is living in darkness. The world is covered in the darkness of sin. It even prefers this darkness. As followers of Christ, be that light. Shine it by the living Word of God. Shine it by taking the gospel to others. May we never forget the responsibility that is ever set before us. Salt and light. It may seem at first to be rather insignificant, but you can see how important it is to our very existence and the compliment that the Lord pays his people, the people who are Christians. That's the value of the individual. And that's what we're trying to stress when we look at these things in our study about small things. I want to begin tonight in Judges chapter 8 and 9. And I think you're familiar with this and would readily agree that this is one of the small things. In Judges chapter 8, we read about the man that many consider to be one of the greatest of all the judges, maybe with the exception of Samuel, and that is the man Gideon. Now the Midianites held the Israelites in torment and captivity. God called Gideon to deliver the people from the Midianites. Well, you remember that he called for volunteers. 32,000 volunteers. But then he said, everybody that's afraid, you can go home. 22,000 of them went home. Lost 2/3 of his army right there because they really didn't want to get into it. The Lord says, you still got too many. And you know, this is a marvelous thing because the Midianites were without number, their camels were without number, they just were a tremendous host. The Lord said, you've got too many. I don't want you to have a big army because when you win, a lot of people are going to think it's because of you, not me. So he put them through a test, a water test, a drinking water test, how they would drink water. Dropped down to 300 men. Now, you know, 300 in comparison with 32,000, that's a small thing, isn't it? Especially against the odds of the Midianites that he's going to have to face. With this 300, however, and following the plan that Gideon laid out before them, they were able to so disturb the Midianites that the Midianites even began to fight among themselves. And look at the small weapons, if you can call it weapons, that Gideon's 300 men had. A pitcher. And in that pitcher, a lamp. And that's what they had. Now, how do you go fight a battle with that kind of equipment? Well, of course, you put your trust and confidence in the Almighty that instructed you how to do things. And they were able to rout the Midianites from out of the land. Gideon was such a tremendous and acceptable leader among the people. The people came to him in the 8th chapter in the 22nd verse. Rule thou over us, both thou and thy son and thy son's son also. For thou hast delivered us from the land of Midian. They were so proud of Gideon, they wanted him to be, he and his family, to be the rulers over the people from then on. And notice Gideon's response, verse 23. I will not rule over you, neither shall my son rule over you. The Lord shall rule over you. Now they wanted to make Gideon as a king. Gideon said, you already got one. God is your king. But you know, as glorious as Gideon's fight with his small number of 300 and his glorious attitude telling the people, God is your king, when he died, he had a son named Abimelech. Now, Abimelech was a very ambitious man. And when Gideon died, the people, as they often did in the time of the judges, went back to their sinful ways and into idolatry. And Abimelech made his move to be the superior leader of the people. Now, Abimelech was the son of Gideon by a concubine of Gideon out of the land of Shechem. It says that Gideon had 70 sons. He must have had a bunch of wives. 70 sons. How is Abimelech going to be able to be conqueror over all of them and be the ruler? Well, he went to the people of Shechem, the home area of his mother. He said, do you want 70 men to rule over you? Or wouldn't it be better to just have one? And oh, by the way, you know, I'm one of you. I'm from Shechem. My mother was from Shechem also. Just remember, I'm one of your kinfolks. Who do you want to lead you? Well, he rallied the men of Shechem, and he killed off all the other sons of Gideon. That seems to be the pattern back in those days when you wanted to take control. Just not outvote them, kill them off, all of your potential competitors. And so he did. And after he had killed all of them, one got away. And that one was named Jotham. Well, Jotham then told the men of Israel a fable, and he was going to rebuke them with this fable. Now, a fable sometimes is thought to be like a parable, and they are in some ways, but a parable, the people involved in a parable, they're real people. I mean, they're things that people could really do. A fable is something that it's just make-believe. It has animals talking and trees talking. And in this fable that Jotham told, you may remember, this is a fable. The trees decided they wanted a king. So they approached the best tree in the land, the olive tree, said, "You be king." He said, "No, I don't want to leave my fatness to be a king." And so they went to the next best, and that was the fig tree. And the fig tree said, no, I don't want to leave my sweetness to do a thing like that. So they came on down a little bit further, and they came to the vine. The vine says, "No, I'm going to produce the wine, and I'm not going to be your king." They finally got down to an old bramble bush. Now that is just a stinking old bush. It's not worth anything. You can't even have a shadow from it. It's just about the worst sort of thing that would grow up. And they said, "Bramble bush, will you be king?" Well, he said yes. And said, "I'll come so powerful, I'll burn down the cedars of Lebanon." Oh, he was going to be top dog. And so Jotham says, "Now that's what you've done. You've chosen a bramble bush to be your king." And he took off. You can imagine that he did. He had to flee. His life was very much in danger. Well, Abimelech then ruled. He reigned for 3 years over Israel. It looked like everything was going his way. God, of course, was very displeased with the things that he did. The things that he did to the sons, his brothers, the sons of Gideon. And God was going to bring him down. But the way he did it was to cause a friction between Abimelech and the men of Shechem, who had lifted him up and supported him to begin with. I don't know what that conflict might have been, but they fell out for one another. So what does Abimelech do? He goes and wages a war against the men of Shechem, and he defeats them. It just looks like everything is going his way. He's been a wicked man, but he's prospering just the same. Well, there was one man named Gael, if you look at him in verse 26, and he came with his brethren and went over to Shechem. The men of Shechem wanted to fight back against Abimelech, and so they put their confidence in this man named Gael, and they cursed Abimelech. And notice verse 28. Who is Abimelech, and who is Shechem, that we should serve him? Is not he the son of Jerubbaal, that's Gideon, and Zubal his officer? Well, Zubal heard him boasting like this, and so he sent a warning to Abimelech about Gael raising opposition to him. And so they went into battle. When they went into battle, it seemed like to Gael that Abimelech had so many soldiers on his side, and Zubal, look at verse 38, he said, "Where is now thy mouth, which thou sayest, who is Abimelech?" So Gael had sort of shot off his mouth there, and Zubal is rubbing it in, and here comes Abimelech, and he absolutely just defeats Gael, and he defeats the Shechemites, and he continues to ride a prosperous way. But then he also went to attack another city that must have been in sympathy with the Shechemites, and this city was named Thebez. And he camped against Thebez, and he came to fight against Thebez, and he came to burn down the tower of Thebez. But he made a mistake. He got too close to the tower and too close to the wall. And there was a woman who dropped a piece of millstone. She must have been a good bombardier. She popped him right in the head and cracked his skull. It's right odd, he says to his armor bearer, "Kill me. I don't want anybody to say that a woman did it." I don't know why that was so bad. If you're going to get killed, I'd just soon get killed by a man as a woman, or a woman as a man. I don't want to be killed by either one, but he didn't. And that reminds us what later happened to King Saul, wasn't it? He said he didn't want the enemies to kill, wanted his armor bearer to kill him. Well, Abimelech died. Now, small things. Who was that woman? We don't know. She's not named. Nothing else said about her. How big a weapon is a small piece of millstone? It's big enough to change the history of the people of Israelites there for a while, wasn't it? A small thing in a right use by a woman that was evidently one that was without recognition, but she dropped it on his head and she changed things. Who could possibly say she was insignificant? Who could possibly say that millstone was an insignificant small thing? You see how much it matters? Now, we don't drop millstones on people, but you know, we can drop the gospel on them. And that's not a small thing. We can do good deeds, service to others, encouragement to others. What I'm trying to emphasize to us, folks, these things matter and these things count. Well, I want us to look at another situation here. Let's see which one I had in mind. Let's turn to 1 Samuel chapter 20. This is not a great big thing here, but this was when Saul was king. Remember last time Saul had sent some people to kill David because he was so jealous of him, and the people said they couldn't kill him because he was sick. And so David knew his life was in danger around Saul. But David and Jonathan, Saul's son, oh, they were close. They had a great love one for the other, respect for one for the other. So it came time for a feast. And ordinarily David would be at that feast. But in the verse 5 he said that he would not be there. "I should not fail to sit with the king at meat, but let me go," he's talking to Jonathan, "that I may hide myself in the field until the third day," that's when the feast would be over. And so he would not be there. So Jonathan gave him permission to hide out. Now he told Jonathan, and later Jonathan told Saul, that David had gone to be with his family for a family sacrifice. Well, that wasn't true. That wasn't where he was going. He was out there hiding in a field. But now Jonathan said, "I'll find out whether it's safe for you to come in and be here with the court or you had better run. I'll let you know. How are you going to let me know? I'm going to have my man shoot an arrow. And if he shoots the arrow a short distance, and I'll tell him it's a short distance, then you can come in. But if it shoots a long distance, that means you better leave. You know, it's interesting. It says David's seat was empty, and usually he would be there, and Saul wanted to know, where is he? He wasn't here yesterday. He's not here today. Well, that's when Jonathan said, well, I gave him permission to be away. You know, Saul threw a javelin at Jonathan, his own son. He had thrown a javelin that David missed. He threw a javelin at Jonathan and he missed. But he was so angry because he said, David's going to take your throne. You won't be the next king. But nonetheless, after Jonathan knew Saul's anger, he went out and told the man to shoot his arrow. Just an arrow, small thing, and he shot it way beyond. That was the signal to David. David, you better get out of here. Saul is still after you, and he will kill you if he can. Small actions by the man that shot the arrow. The arrow was a small sign, but a very significant one, was it not? But there is something that really is a little bit more significant than that, and that's when David was king. Turn to 2 Samuel chapter 6. Now you will recall from your previous Bible studies that when Eli, the next to the last judge, was still in control, they fought the Philistines. And his sons, Hophni and Phinehas, took the Ark of the Covenant into the field of battle because they thought that would give them the victory. Well, what happened? Well, it was captured by the Philistines. They didn't want to keep it, though. They took it to first one city and then to another city and then to another city. Everywhere they took it, the people were plagued in some way or another. And so they sent it back. They sent it back into Israel. They sent it back to the men of Beth Shemesh for a while. It wound up at the household of a man named Abinadab. Well, David decided he would bring the Ark of the Covenant, and that shows you it was out of Jerusalem for a long time. He would bring the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. And now if you look in 2 Samuel chapter 6, verse 3, and they set the Ark of God upon a new cart and brought it out of the house of Abinadab that was in Gibeah. And Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, drave the cart, and they brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was at Gibeah. Accompanying the Ark of God, Ahio went before the Ark. So here they come, carrying the Ark on a new cart. What's wrong with that? Well, in the book of Numbers, it was instructed that the ark, when it was carried, was to be carried on the shoulders of the priest. This was a wrong way to carry it. And as they were plodding along, we read here in verse 6, when they came to Nashon's threshing floor, Uzzah put forth his hand to the ark of God and took hold of it, for the oxen shook it, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Uzzah, and God smote him there for his error, and there he died by the ark of God. I've often felt sorry for Uzzah. I think he had good intentions. He meant well. It must have been maybe a spontaneous action on his part. He thought the ark of God was going to fall off the cart. He wanted to steady it. He didn't want that to happen. And what was wrong with that? He was forbidden, back again from the book of Numbers, to touch that ark. The men of Beth-shemesh had been penalized because they touched the ark. And now Uzzah is stricken dead. If you read in the commentary of Albert Barnes, and this is the reason I've chosen this to be one of the small things. Albert Barnes says, Uzzah's offense seems very small. Well, that's the way it seems to Albert Barnes. And that's the way it seemed to David, because David was angry because God smote Uzzah. But was it a small thing? Can we learn something from this action? Friend, when God gives instructions, they're not up for, well, you can do it if you want to, or if you want to change it, you can change it. Or when God gives instructions, He expects them to be respected. He expects those things to be obeyed. And it might have appeared to be a small thing that he touched the ark and steadied the ark, even with good intentions on his part, but he violated the law of God. We don't have the right, even in small things, brethren, to violate the law of God. Now we know in big things, killing somebody, or burning somebody's house down, or committing adultery, or stealing, those are big. We recognize that. Probably forsaking the assembly is a small thing to a lot of people. Nobody here, because you're here. See, you never get to talk to the ones you really want to because they're not here. But that might be a small thing. Failure to make a proper evaluation of our contribution. That might be a small thing to some folks. As to how you speak to your brethren and how you treat them, is that a small thing? I think God has taught us, has He not, to speak kindly and to be loyal and firm, but at the same time have the interest of the other and to seek the other's highest good. Small things matter when God has appointed them. And I think we learned this from Uzzah. Do you not think so also? Small things. Well, there was another occasion in 2 Samuel chapter 17. I believe I can tell this one. Just barely will be able to. It happened with the rebellion led by Absalom against David to take his throne. And Absalom was successful in driving David from his capital. David fled to a little place called Mahanaim. And it looked like Absalom was going to just take over. And there was one of David's counselors named Ahithophel. And Ahithophel turned against David and turned to Absalom. Bill told me not long ago, and I've looked it up, and this is in the Bible. It looks like Ahithophel was the grandfather of Bathsheba. Maybe that's the reason Ahithophel turned against David. I don't know. Don't take that for that's in 2 James, and I'm the 2 James, and you can't put any reliability on that particularly. But Ahithophel was his counselor. And with David having been driven out of his palace, Absalom asked Ahithophel for, what should we do now? Ahithophel says, strike him. Hit him now. He's weak. He's scattered. His men are scattered. And David was in a bad situation. He was away from his capital. He didn't know where his forces were. He didn't know who was loyal to them and who wasn't. Ahithophel gave good counsel to Absalom if Absalom wanted to defeat David. But there was another counselor of David that David had persuaded to go and pretend to be a counselor with Absalom. His name was Hushai. Hushai came to Absalom, and Absalom said, "Oh, you turn against your master?" And he said, "Well, I'm going with the one that's supposed to be the ruler, and that's you, Absalom. I'm on your side. You can count on me." Of course, there wasn't a word of truth in it, but he got the confidence of Absalom. And they heard the counsel that Ahithophel gave Absalom, but Hushai said, that's not good. You better not do that, and I'll tell you why. Your father and his men, they're fighters, and they are sly, and you don't know all about where David is anyway, and they're not going to take this lying down, and all they have to do is to make an attack upon the men of Absalom and win a small victory. They don't have to completely defeat him, just a small victory, and the news will spread that Absalom's forces are being defeated and David is coming back and you will be destroyed. He said, "It's not good. This is not good counsel." Absalom says, "I think you're right. We won't go after him right now." You know, poor old Ahithophel, when he found out that his counsel was not taken, he went back to his home and he hanged himself. Now, you talk about disappointment. He was, wasn't he? He was disappointed in himself. He didn't get his way. Well, Hushai, you don't read much about Hushai. Hushai was not a very prominent counselor even of David. And he wasn't a prominent, he's hardly mentioned. I don't know whether he's mentioned anymore after this situation here or not. But he was a small man in one way, but his counsel was listened to, and this small man was able to influence Absalom to such an extent that he probably, buying time for David to regroup, saved David and saved David's throne. Hushai, small man, on a big mission with big influence, and he accomplished a great deal, though he was otherwise relatively insignificant. Folks, we can do more than we think we can. We are of more value than we think we are, and the Lord approves of us when we do what we can. Well, that will be our class for tonight. We'll pick up some small things again 2 weeks from tonight.